while the New Zealand media were legally blocked from reporting key details of the Tom Phillips case, someone else wasn't. Because while New Zealand journalists were shut out, a commercial documentary crew was quietly given behind-the-scenes access to the investigation itself. And this isn't an isolated decision. It follows a pattern, one that appeared before one of the most controversial criminal prosecutions in British legal history, when filmmakers are granted a front row seat to events that are still being investigated. The line between documentary making and narrative shaping becomes dangerously thin, especially when evidence hasn't yet been tested, and public confidence depends as much on perception as it does on outcomes. So the real question here becomes who gets to shape the story of an investigation that's still under scrutiny? Because this isn't just about access, it's about control, and how to understand how unusual this access was. We need to go back to the very beginning of this case. Tom Phillips, a father of three, was in the middle of an ongoing family court proceeding. On September 11, 2021, he disappeared with the children from the family farm in Marokopa. 2 days later, his Toyota Hilux was found below the tide line at Cherryl Beach. The keys had been left under the floor mat. At first, searchers feared the worst, that they had been swept out to sea. But nearly 3 weeks later, on September 30, Phillips and the children walked back onto the property alive. He later claimed that he had been camping inland to clear his head. And then something changed. On 9 December 2021, Phillips disappeared again, this time with the children, and they would not be seen for nearly 4 years. And now, to put this into context, the area they disappeared into was some of the most unforgiving territory in the country. It's steep, it's remote, and covered in dense bush. Police believed he had taken them into a remote bushland in western Waikato, following a dispute with their mother. What follows became one of the most prolonged and resource-intensive police hunts in modern history. But that wasn't the end of it, because over time the case escalated. In May 2023, Phillips was linked to an alleged armed bank robbery where shots were reportedly fired. In August 2023, CCTV footage captured a man believed to be Phillips shopping at a Bunnings store in disguise. And then in October 2024, there was the first confirmed sighting of all 3 children walking through farmland near Marokopa. Each development intensified public pressure on the police, and then, just months later, he disappeared again. The case began to escalate, this time with a violent end in the early hours of 8 September 2025. At 2:30 a.m, police responded to a break-in at Poipoi involving 2 individuals on a quad bike. By 3:20 a.m, officers had deployed road spikes on Waipuna Road. And while all of this was unfolding publicly, behind closed doors, there was a camera crew. During the confrontation, an officer was shot in the head with a high-powered rifle. A second officer returned fire. Tom Phillips was killed. 1 child was recovered immediately. The other 2 were located that day. Later that morning, Acting Deputy Commissioner Jill Rogers confirmed Phillips' death and the recovery of the 3 children. She described the situation as devastating and emphasised that the children's safety had always been a priority. And yet another story was taking shape, an independent police conduct authority inquiry which was digging into the actions of the police. And then there was also a coronial inquiry examining the facts, and then of course wider public demand for answers. All of these processes are still ongoing. They exist to determine whether the police's actions were justified, proportionate, or even lawful. And critically, they rely on evidence that has not been fully legally tested. And while all of this was unfolding, something else was happening behind the scenes. A documentary crew had been embedded inside the investigation for much of the year leading up to the fatal shooting of Tom Phillips. And this raises a critical question. How did filmmakers gain that level of access to an active police investigation? A report by Franklin Times revealed that a documentary about the search for Tom Phillips and his children was currently in development for global release, but key details remained hidden. At the centre of the issue is an access agreement released under the Official Information Act, a document so heavily redacted that the identity of the streaming platform behind the project had been removed entirely. The documentary's working title, The Marokopa Project, is directly tied to Operation Curly. The agreement was signed in March 2025 and it granted production companies like NHNZ Worldwide and UK Grain Media access to parts of the investigation. This access included police briefings, selected evidential material, and controlled filming opportunities. Police retained editorial oversight, but crucial sections including distribution and release terms are fully withheld. Until now, Stuff reports that the streaming giant Netflix will screen the documentary directly to the New Zealand public. As reported by Paddy Gower at Stuff, police have apologised for providing misleading information during their efforts to keep Netflix involvement secret. I'll put a link to the Stuff article in the description below. But it's the context that matters here because the identity of the filmmakers are all the more relevant. Now, Grain Media is not a minor player. The company has produced multiple high-profile documentaries for major international streaming platforms. Their involvement strongly suggests that the project is intended for a global audience, not just a domestic one. It remains unclear whether the documentary itself will ultimately proceed. In high-profile cases such as this, perception doesn't just follow events, it shapes them. Public confidence depends not only what the police do, but on how these actions are seen in real time. And in this case, access to the Tom Phillips case was not equal. While the New Zealand media were largely restricted from reporting key details about the case, international filmmakers were being allowed inside the investigation itself. And that imbalance matters because it creates two different versions of the same investigation, one restricted by law and one shaped by controlled access. The police knew that every decision they make will be scrutinised and debated. But when local media is excluded and international media is invited, there is a risk that the story is no longer being reported. It's being curated. And in the middle of all this, there's a public inquiry. Now, I want you to stay here with me because this is where it gets genuinely uncomfortable. Because public inquiries are built on independence. They are designed to scrutinise institutions from a distance, free from influence, pressure, or preemptive narratives. So when the police allow filmmakers inside an active investigation, several risks emerge. That concern becomes sharper when you look at what access was involved. Because when police provide filmmakers with behind-the-scenes access, including briefings, commentary, or operational footage, they risk releasing material that later may become central to the inquiry's work. If these are presented even indirectly, before formal examination, it can create the impression that the narrative is being shaped in advance. The inquiry's independence relies not only what is said, but on what is seen to be influencing the process. And this is where the issue becomes even more complicated, because when officers speak on camera about events that are still under review, it inevitably influences how those events are perceived in the public's eye. Now, to be clear, police cooperation with media is not inherently improper. In fact, it can promote transparency and public understanding. But the timing during an active and scrutinised investigation is what raises the concern here. That's why many agencies take a cautious approach to media involvement during active investigations. Restricting information avoids creating a narrative before the facts are available. Ultimately, if operational decisions are shown with commentary before independently being reviewed, viewers may form conclusions about justification or even fault before those questions are formally tested. Because this isn't just unusual, it's potentially problematic. And before you think this is a uniquely New Zealand problem, well, it isn't. This kind of arrangement has happened before. In the case of Lucy Letby, the Cheshire Police also cooperated with a major streaming documentary service, Netflix, while legal processes are still ongoing. A different case, a different country, but the same underlying tension. When investigators participate in storytelling before scrutiny is complete, the boundary between documentation and influence becomes blurred. It risks shaping the story in ways that favour the agency granting access, rather than presenting a balanced account. This cooperation meant that Netflix framing included extensive arrest footage, selective interviews, and dramatic pacing. The framing had the potential to reinforce perceptions of guilt. In both the Lucy Letby and the Tom Phillips case, the core issue is not whether the police intended to influence public perception. The issue is that the media's access during an active and contested investigation can unintentionally shape public belief in ways that outpace legal scrutiny. That is why public inquiries, appellate courts and review bodies exist, to slow down the narrative, to test the evidence and separate fact from framing. Because if public perception is shaped before the inquiry begins, then the inquiry is no longer operating in a neutral environment. At its core, this case raises a simple but uncomfortable question. Should those under investigation be involved in telling the story of that investigation before the facts have been independently verified and tested? Because once a narrative takes hold, it doesn't just inform the public, it can shape what the public are willing to question. And this depends on the process unfolding without influence. Because once cameras are inside the room, that line becomes much harder to see. And if you value evidence-based analysis like this, consider liking, sharing and subscribing. It helps this kind of scrutiny reach more people, because this story isn't over. If you want to see how this plays out in another case where a documentary maker may have influenced public perception, watch the video below, where a Netflix documentary team was given access to another high-profile case, because this story isn't over. I'll see you in the next one.